Hello and welcome to Vajirao and Reddy Institute. In this lecture, I'll be talking about a very important concept of the general studies paper, which is biodiversity hotspots. So the biodiversity hotspot is a topic which comes under the general topic biodiversity, which is always studied in combination with environment and ecology. These three trio, environment, ecology and biodiversity, forms a very big chunk of the questions which are asked in the prelims of civil service examinations. Usually around 17 to 18 questions are asked totally from these subjects, and this forms a very important part of your preparation. In this lecture, I'll be covering the concept called as biodiversity hotspots. The concept of biodiversity hotspot was given by an ecologist, Norman Mayers. So he is the first person who proposed the concept of biodiversity hotspots. What is the biodiversity hotspot? It is basically a biogeographic region that is having two characteristics: a significant reservoir of biodiversity, and second, threatened by destructions. These are the two criteria which are usually taken into consideration before declaring an area as a biodiversity hotspot. So biogeographic region is a region where the living organisms are present, plants, animals, microorganisms and various other living organisms are present in that geographical area. So that is a biogeographical area. The criteria which says is it should be very rich in species diversity. It should have more number of species. It should be diverse. And second is it is threatened by the distinction or threatened by the destruction of the entire ecosystem by various reasons. Okay. Most of these hotspots are located in tropics. The concentration of the hotspots are present in the tropical regions, but they are not confined to tropics. That means there are some biodiversity hotspots which are little away from the tropics. We cannot say that all the biodiversity hotspots are present within the tropics. There are some exceptions. That's why they says that it's not confined to the tropics. These regions are under threat from the humans. So that is why we declare them as a biodiversity hotspot, as a measure of conservation, as a part of biodiversity conservation. So that is what biodiversity hotspot is. Now this is a map which shows different biodiversity hotspots in different places on the earth. Okay, we have biodiversity hotspots, okay, on almost all the continents and the countries, and mostly they are present in the middle, in the areas in and around the equator, which we call it as tropics. But we can also see some of the biodiversity hotspots which are spread away from the tropics. So that's why we say they are not confined to tropics. Why I am stressing on this point is there was a question on this in the UPSC prelims. So it needs to be understood that it is not only present in tropics. Now this is a hotspot, and in total there are around 36 hotspots which have been declared on the planet. So there are 36 spots which are declared as biodiversity hotspots based on the criteria which we discussed. That is, it should have very high species diversity. When you say very high species diversity, it is mostly related to the endemism. Most of the species should be endemic in that place. And second, it should have been destructed. How much of endemic should be present and how much of area needs to be declared or needs to be destructed in order to declare it as a biodiversity hotspot, I'll be showing you in my next slide. This is a criteria. Okay, whenever an area is taken up for qualification or considered for qualification as a biodiversity hotspot, it needs to qualify two strict criteria. The first one is it should have at least 1500 vascular plants as endemics. So there should be 1500 plants, vascular plants, that means the higher plants which are endemic to that place. When you say endemic, this is a phenomena where a particular species is present only in that location and nowhere else on the planet. So that means that species is found naturally. I am stressing on the word naturally, because even artificially, if somebody takes out the plant and releases it somewhere, that doesn't become natural. Naturally, a particular species should be present in that area, and other than that area, other than that location, it should not be present anywhere else on the planet. That is called as endemism. So the first criteria is around 1500 species need to be endemic. The plant species needs to be endemic. That means to say that this area has very high percentage of plant life. 1500 different species which are confined to that area. And it also means that this hotspot is irreplaceable. That means if at all the species present in that area is lost because of some reasons, because of over exploitation, because of anthropogenic reasons, because of any activity, then there is nowhere on the planet where you can get that particular species and plant it and get back the diversity. So that place is irreversible. That's what it means. So it should have at least 1500 vascular plants of endemics, and it should be irreplaceable. Okay, so that's the first criteria. When you say if it is irreplaceable or this much of species, then obviously means that this place is very high, rich in biodiversity. Obviously, when there is more plants, vascular plants, then there will be more amount of animal life or fauna which will be there. So plants or the producers are the basic foundation for the entire food chain, and if there are good amount of plants, then definitely there will be good amount of animal life in that particular region. The second criteria says that it must have 30% or less of its original natural vegetation. Whatever the natural vegetation which was present earlier, so only 30% of that vegetation should be surviving at that present. That means to say that around 70% of the population would be destroyed. They have been already destroyed. Okay, 70% of population would be destroyed and only 30% or less would be surviving. If any area qualifies these two criteria, then that area will be considered, or that area will be declared as a biodiversity hotspots. These are the two strict criteria. If there are less vascular plants endemic to the region than 1500, that area will not be qualified as a biodiversity hotspot. Or if there is more than 30% of the original natural vegetation still surviving, we are not considering to be a biodiversity hotspot. Having said that, I'll get you to a question which was asked in UPSC Prelims 2011. Three of the following criteria have contributed to the recognition of Western Ghats, Sri Lanka and Indo-Burma region. So they have asked, given a list of 6 criteria, and they have asked which 3 of the above are correct criteria in this context. So the reason why I am showing this question is to let you know how the questions are being asked and what kind of understanding we need to get from a particular topic which we have just read. So if we compare, species richness definitely is one of the criteria, because we are talking about the diversity or like more than 1500 species, that means to say that yes, species richness is there. Vegetation density, how much of vegetation is present in particular area, particular square kilometer or unit area, doesn't matter. Okay, so the density of the plants or number of plants present in particular area is not a criteria, or the dense, how dense they are placed is not a criteria. So vegetation density is not a option. Density is number of individuals per unit area, so which is not a criteria. Altogether they should be more than 1500 species, okay, irrespective of their density. Third is endemism. So that is definitely a criteria, because we are saying that these many plant species need to be endemic to that region. Okay, endemism is one such trait we are looking at. Ethnobotanical importance, no, we are not considering the ethnobotanical. What is its importance with respect to the local population living there and how important the plants are to that particular local. That is what is ethnobotanical importance means. That is not a criteria. Then threat perception, we say that 70% of that should be already been destroyed. So there is a threat perception, this is one of the criteria. And adaptation of flora and fauna to warm and humid conditions is not a criteria. So 1, 3 and 5, so this is the option. So this is the option which is been given. So that was a question. Now, how many biodiversity hotspots are there? All over the globe, there are around 36 areas which has qualified as biodiversity hotspots. So the latest addition to the list of the biodiversity hotspots, the 36th one is the North American coastal plain. So this is the latest one, and this 36 biodiversity hotspots, if you look into the area which they have covered, it represents only 2.4% of the Earth's land surface. Out of 100% of the land surface, only 2.4% of the area is covered by these 36 biodiversity hotspots. But it supports more than half of world species, world's plant species, and around 43% of birds, mammals, reptiles and amphibians. That means to say that around 50% of plants, animals and other organisms are present in just 2.4% of these biodiversity hotspots on the planet. That is very, very high concentration of biodiversity. Who will declare the area as biodiversity hotspots? So the declaration of, or the decision of declaring an area as biodiversity hotspots is done by an organization called as Conservation International. So there can be two questions from here. Okay, one is how many areas, how many biodiversity hotspots are there around the globe? So they might give different number. You should be remembering that there are 36. Then the another question which might be asked, the probable question is, what is the latest addition to the list of biodiversity hotspots? Which of the biodiversity hotspot has been recently added to the list of biodiversity hotspots? So they might give some options, and the North American coastal plain would be the right answer. And then they might give statement that the biodiversity hotspots, even though having 2.4% of land area, they cover more than 40% of the plants, animals, amphibians and reptiles to that. And they might ask whether it is true or false. Okay, they might give 2-3 statements, and which of the following is correct, 1 and 2, 1, 2 and 3. So that is the kind of questions which are coming in the UPSC prelims nowadays. Or the last question which could be asked is, who declares, which organization declares the an area as a biodiversity hotspots? They might give an option like WWF, World Health Organization, UNICEF or Conservation International. So you should be knowing it is the Conservation International which identifies these areas as biodiversity hotspots. Biodiversity hotspots in India. In India, totally there are 4 biodiversity hotspots. So we have the Himalayan hotspot. So most of the Jammu and Kashmir, Himachal Pradesh and Arunachal Pradesh region come under Himalayan hotspot. It is home to a lot of plants and animals. There is a huge biogeographical variation in terms of altitude, in terms of the temperature, and because of these variations, a lot of plants and animals exist or thrive in here. It is home to a huge number of organisms which are endemic to this particular area, the Himalayan hotspot. It not just covers India, it covers parts of Pakistan, covers Nepal, Bhutan and Myanmar as well. So that is Himalayan hotspot. So I will be individually discussing these hotspots and letting you know what are the different kinds of plants, different kinds of animal diversity, because a lot of questions has been asked from here. They have asked what are the species which are found when you move along the Himalayas. So they have given the list and asked you to identify which species are present and which are not. Okay. So while approaching, we will be studying individually these hotspots and what are the different characteristics of these hotspots. Second is Indo-Burma region. It covers mainly the eastern part of India, which covers the areas of Myanmar and in and around places. Only a part of India of Mizoram falls under this hotspots. That's why we say that these 4 hotspots falls under Indian territory. A small part of India falls under this territory. Third is Western Ghats in Sri Lanka. This is entirely falling under India and like entire Sri Lanka. So the whole Western Ghats area and the Sri Lanka part, they both have been considered as one biodiversity hotspot. So with this we will also come to know about an information that the biodiversity hotspot may not be connected. They can be an area which are not connected to each other. So the Western Ghats and Sri Lanka are not connected. So that, but still they whole are taken as one biodiversity hotspot. So Western Ghats and Sri Lanka area, it is considered as one of the most diverse or biodiversically richest hotspot. So it is one of the hottest hotspots. There are 10 places which are chosen as hottest hotspots, and out of these 10, Western Ghats in Sri Lanka is one among them. It has very high diversity or biodiversity in terms of endemism. There are a lot of freshwater endemism, amphibian species which are endemic to this species, and so this is also under very huge threat. There are around 25% of this area have shrinked. Okay, it has shrunk by 25% in the last 2 decades. So there has been a lot of committees which are formed to review this and suggest on how to reduce the impact of human activities on these areas. So we'll study that. And finally, we have an area called as Sundaland. Sundaland hotspot. It's an archipelago which consisting of around 17,000 species, around 17,000 islands put together in a archipelago forms the Sundaland. A very small part of the Nicobar Islands falls under this entire hotspot, and that's why we say, like, Indian territory also is one of the territory under Sundaland hotspot, a small one. Madagascar and Indian Ocean Islands are not a part of the biodiversity hotspot which falls within the Indian territory. Even though there is a terminology called as Indian, it doesn't fall under the category of the areas, the hotspots falling within Indian territory. So this is a group of islands in Madagascar and some of the islands in Indian Ocean, but definitely not within the Indian territory. No Indian territory comes under Madagascar and Indian Ocean Islands. So in the next lecture, I will be talking about the individual hotspots, and we will be discussing different factors the fauna, the flora, the conditions which prevail in that, and I'll be discussing the questions which has been asked from this part. So till then, take care. Thank you.